She never came home. It was a simple phrase that reverberated through the Jensen household like a hammer striking glass. Yet, no one could grasp its weight. Clara Jensen, 29, vibrant, and fiercely independent, had left her apartment that morning in Portland, Oregon, as she always did. She had coffee in hand, her laptop bag slung casually over one shoulder, and a faint smile curling across her lips. But that night, when the lights of the apartment dimmed and the hours ticked into darkness, Clara was nowhere to be found. It all began with a swipe. A small motion on a screen that would unknowingly unravel her life and plunge her family into a nightmare that would stretch across continents. Clara was careful, always the rational one. She avoided random meetups, she double-checked profiles, and she joked with her friends that she would never fall for one of those sketchy online guys. But there was something about Evan Callahan. Something that drew her in. Evan's profile was curated to perfection. A charming smile, dimples that seemed natural, and eyes that hinted at adventure and mystery. His bio mentioned his love for literature, coffee, and obscure Icelandic poetry, a detail that caught Clara off guard, making her heart skip. For weeks, they exchanged messages that oscillated between playful banter and deep personal reflections. He always responded quickly, as if waiting for her next thought. Clara, who had grown accustomed to ghosting and empty replies, found the consistency intoxicating. The week before the disappearance, the exchanges had taken a new turn. Evan had spoken of being in the United States temporarily, passing through Portland and Seattle, and suggested a meeting. Clara hesitated. Every rational thought screamed caution. And yet, she rationalized it. He was just a man traveling, wanting to meet someone who shared his interests. She would be cautious, she promised herself. She would meet him in a public place, check in with Sophie, her roommate, and leave if anything felt off. The night before, she lay awake, the glow of her phone illuminating her face as she typed responses to Evan's last message. "Can't wait to meet you tomorrow," she wrote, pressing send with a small shiver of excitement. But beneath the thrill lurked a gnawing unease, the kind that lives in the back of your mind, whispering warnings you often ignore. Morning arrived, gray and drizzling over Portland. Clara donned a navy coat, her hair dampened by the mist, and took a cab to the coffee shop Evan had suggested. She arrived early, choosing a table by the window where she could watch the entrance. Each passerby made her pulse race. She checked her phone, her emails, and the clock. 15 minutes past the scheduled time. 30. 45. Evan never arrived. At first, she thought perhaps he was delayed. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, panic began to take root. She called him. No answer. Texted him. Nothing. The profile was still visible, but there was no activity, no sign of life. A barista offered her a warm drink, noticing the anxiety etched across her face. Clara accepted with a small, distracted smile, eyes scanning the street, hoping to see someone approaching, someone who would explain this strange delay. But the street remained empty. Returning home that evening, a sinking realization hit her. Something was wrong. The next day, she tried again. Messages went unanswered. Calls went straight to voicemail. And then, as if erased from existence, Evan Callahan's profile vanished from the dating app. No digital trace remained. Every carefully crafted detail, every photo and message, was gone. Fear turned to terror. Clara reported the disappearance to the Portland Police Department, and Officer David Ramirez was assigned. Ramirez had years of experience with missing persons and online disappearances. He examined the messages, the emails, and the digital footprints. But each lead dissolved into shadows. Phone numbers disconnected. IP addresses traced to dead ends. Evan Callahan was gone, and with him, Clara had vanished into uncertainty. Friends and family were devastated. Sophie combed through Clara's belongings, checking her apartment for any clue, while her mother, Helen Jensen, reached out to local media and posted pleas on social platforms. Each post carried the same refrain: "Have you seen Clara Jensen?" But responses were scarce, vague, or unhelpful. Weeks into the investigation, a cryptic email arrived at the police department from an anonymous sender: "Stop looking. Some things are not meant to be found." It was short, unnerving, and lacked any identifying details. Ramirez considered the possibility that the sender was Evan himself, or someone connected to him. But who could vanish so completely in a world dominated by digital footprints? Detectives expanded the investigation internationally, focusing on Iceland. Evan had mentioned Reykjavik repeatedly, weaving tales of its serene cafes and quiet streets. Investigators sought records of flights, hotel stays, and local surveillance footage. One hotel reported a man paying cash and providing a false identity around the timeframe Evan claimed to be there. Surveillance showed a figure resembling Evan briefly entering a cafe and leaving, but the grainy footage offered no confirmation. Meanwhile, Clara's friends and family grappled with the psychological toll of not knowing. Every day brought questions with no answers. Was she kidnapped? Did she flee voluntarily under duress? Or was this part of a larger scheme, someone targeting women through false identities? In Reykjavik, a man named Eric Sigurdsson came forward, describing an encounter with someone matching Evan's description. The man had asked to borrow devices, checked Wi-Fi security, and then vanished without leaving evidence. Eric's testimony, while indirect, hinted at a level of sophistication that suggested Evan, or whoever he truly was meticulous and experienced in manipulation. Digital experts brought in to assist the case identified a troubling pattern. Multiple aliases, identical methods of approaching women, carefully constructed personas. These were not random acts but part of a calculated operation. Clara's disappearance was likely not isolated. The perpetrator could be operating across borders, orchestrating events with chilling precision. A few months later, Clara's laptop registered a login from an IP traced to Reykjavik. Digital forensics could not conclusively identify who accessed the account, but the implication was clear. Someone was monitoring, orchestrating, or possibly taunting the investigation. Months turned into a year. Investigators followed every digital breadcrumb, analyzing travel logs, hotel payments, and public tips. Yet Evan's real identity remained elusive. Each lead led to dead ends, each testimony raised more questions than answers. Clara Jensen had disappeared, and with her, the certainty of safety in the online world. The deeper the investigation went, the murkier the waters became. Detective David Ramirez pored over every digital footprint, every grainy security clip, and every message Clara had ever exchanged with Evan Callahan. Nothing added up. No travel records matched his claims. No financial transactions connected him to Portland, Seattle, or Reykjavik. And yet, the careful curation of his online persona suggested a meticulous mind, someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the digital world without leaving a trace. Weeks later, a breakthrough appeared, but it was a whisper, fragile and uncertain. A woman in Seattle, named Alyssa Mercer, came forward. She had received messages from Evan Callahan months before Clara. Alyssa's story was eerily similar. Charming introductions, shared interests, a suggested meeting that never materialized. "He seemed so real," Alyssa said in a statement. "And then he was gone, like he'd never existed." Ramirez and his team began connecting the dots. Could Clara's disappearance be part of a larger pattern? Investigators widened the search, interviewing dozens of women across the U.S. who had reported similar interactions. Some had only been ghosted. Others had received threats or subtle manipulations designed to silence them. Evan Callahan, or whoever he really was, had built a network of carefully engineered encounters, preying on trust and desire. Then, another lead surfaced in Reykjavik. Lena Carlson, a cybersecurity consultant, had traced a small digital footprint that linked back to a series of VPNs routed through multiple countries. The signals suggested that Evan, or his operator, had access to sophisticated tools allowing him to manipulate and erase digital evidence with near-perfect precision. Lena noted that the sophistication was unusual for a single individual, It hinted at either professional knowledge or organized support. One of the most chilling discoveries came from Clara's own devices. Her laptop, thought to have been dormant after the initial disappearance, had been accessed multiple times. Each login used a series of proxies and anonymized connections. Forensic experts concluded that someone was monitoring the investigation, possibly reading messages between authorities and family members. Whoever this was had not only lured Clara but had also inserted themselves into every subsequent step, shaping the narrative from the shadows. Meanwhile, small pieces of physical evidence began to emerge. A cab driver in Seattle recalled picking up a man matching Evan's description near the coffee shop the morning Clara vanished. The man had been polite, calm, and unnervingly precise with directions, but he paid in cash and refused a receipt. Surveillance footage from a nearby street showed him walking briskly toward a bus station, yet no records indicated he boarded any vehicle. His path vanished into the city, as if he had never been there. Detectives considered the possibility that Evan had accomplices or used temporary identities to traverse cities undetected. It was no longer a story of a single vanished woman. It was a psychological labyrinth designed to ensnare and disorient anyone who tried to follow the trail. As the investigation progressed, Ramirez received a tip from an anonymous source claiming to have seen Evan in Portland shortly before Clara's disappearance. The witness, a young man named Johann Sigurd, described a quiet, precise figure who seemed to blend seamlessly into public spaces. Johann remembered noticing how Evan carefully observed people, noting behaviors and reactions, then leaving without interacting directly. It was a methodical pattern, almost clinical in its execution. Back in the US, authorities coordinated with Icelandic law enforcement. Hotel records, cash transactions, and brief sightings painted a picture of a man, or network of individuals, capable of traveling undetected, exploiting gaps in international oversight, and using technology to manipulate reality. Lena Carlson mapped potential identities, linking multiple email addresses, social media accounts, and partial usernames to a single cryptic signature. It was as if Evan existed simultaneously in multiple spaces, a phantom who could vanish into any corner of the globe. Despite these leads, tangible evidence remained scarce. Clara's last known location, the coffee shop, became a shrine of unanswered questions. Investigators reconstructed her movements down to the minute, analyzing interactions, seating positions, and pedestrian traffic. Nothing explained how Evan, or his real identity, could orchestrate her disappearance without leaving a trace. Ramirez described it as a perfectly executed vanishing act. Then came the psychological element. Investigators discovered that several women, including Clara, had received subtle warnings from Evan that something was not right if they pressed too hard for personal details. He carefully manipulated fear and curiosity, testing boundaries and trust before orchestrating his disappearances. It became clear that the pattern was as much psychological as physical, a predator operating in the digital age with unprecedented sophistication. A twist emerged when a hacker collective, operating anonymously online, reached out to Ramirez. They had been tracking similar cases where women disappeared after interactions with various aliases resembling Evan Callahan. Their research suggested a global ring of digital manipulation, using dating apps, social media, and travel networks to orchestrate disappearances. The collective provided partial data on potential locations and identities, but every piece required meticulous verification, as the network was designed to erase itself at the slightest exposure. The chilling part was the reach. Messages, digital manipulations, and social cues were sent not only to potential victims but also to authorities, seemingly to test the limits of the investigation. At one point, Clara's mother received a message with a cryptic phrase: "The closer you look, the further she drifts." It was a cruel psychological echo of the pattern used on Clara herself. Investigators began theorizing about the motive. Was this a single individual with a compulsion for control? A sophisticated criminal network trafficking in psychological manipulation? Or something even darker, where online identities were simply tools in a carefully orchestrated web? Each hypothesis raised more questions than it answered. Months into the investigation, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source. A small Icelandic cafe employee recognized a man matching Evan's description from a photograph. The man had stayed for a few hours, seemingly alone, taking notes, observing, then leaving without making a purchase. Surveillance footage captured his presence, but his face remained partially obscured, a shadow in the doorway. The employee recalled an unusual detail. The man had asked for the cafe's Wi-Fi password repeatedly, seemingly testing network security. Detective Ramirez realized that whoever Evan was, he had not only lured Clara but had studied her patterns, anticipated investigation methods, and remained always one step ahead. Every lead pointed toward meticulous planning, careful execution, and international coordination. It became clear that this was no ordinary missing person case. It was a cold case built for elusiveness. Then came a digital twist. Lena Carlson discovered that several of Evan's accounts were linked to IP addresses in countries that had no record of his physical presence. These virtual footprints suggested a level of digital deception that was far beyond typical criminal activity. Investigators speculated that Evan had the technical knowledge to create multiple digital personas simultaneously, each designed to manipulate, distract, and mislead. Clara's disappearance had thus become a complex puzzle with pieces scattered across continents, digital platforms, and fleeting eyewitness accounts. The man she trusted, who may never have existed, had turned the simple desire for connection into a labyrinthine mystery, impossible to solve without extraordinary luck or insight. The months stretched into years, but Clara Jensen's case never faded from the minds of those tracking it. Detective David Ramirez had followed hundreds of leads, yet each one ended in shadows, fragments, and whispers. It was as if Evan Callahan, the man, or persona, who had lured her into that fateful meeting, existed only to vanish. And the more the investigation advanced, the more it became clear that this disappearance was not random, nor impulsive. It was the work of someone brilliant, meticulous, and perhaps uncatchable. Then, an unexpected tip arrived from Iceland. A local woman, Sigrid Magnusdóttir reported seeing a man who resembled Evan at a remote guest house near the northern coast. She remembered him because of the oddity of his behavior. He asked detailed questions about the guest house's security cameras, the Wi-Fi system, and local law enforcement presence. He left shortly after arrival, paying in cash, and did not register under his real name. Surveillance footage captured him entering and exiting, his face partially obscured by a hood. But the guest house records provided no identity, no passport, nothing. He was gone before anyone could track him. Ramirez realized that whoever had orchestrated Clara's disappearance had been traveling in plain sight, leaving just enough evidence to taunt investigators without ever revealing themselves. It was psychological warfare. Every trace led to a dead end, every clue opened new avenues of uncertainty, every witness remembered a detail that could never be verified. Meanwhile, Lena Carlson, the cybersecurity expert, uncovered a shocking digital trail. Several accounts linked to Evan's aliases were accessed simultaneously from servers in different countries. The pattern suggested either a highly skilled individual with multiple virtual identities or a coordinated group capable of remote manipulation. Lena's analysis indicated a high probability that Clara had been lured into a network of deception, possibly involving multiple operatives, designed to exploit both digital and psychological vulnerabilities. The investigation deepened when an anonymous message reached Ramirez. A series of cryptic emails containing fragments of Clara's last known digital activity, timestamps, and partial GPS coordinates. They hinted at an offshore location, possibly a safe house or temporary hideout, but decoding the messages proved nearly impossible. The emails were encrypted, and any attempt to trace the sender triggered false leads. Ramirez knew that whoever sent them was watching the investigation closely, always one step ahead. At the same time, families of other women who had reported similar encounters began sharing their stories. The more Ramirez learned, the more chilling the pattern became. women targeted through dating apps, persuaded to meet a seemingly trustworthy persona, and then disappearing, or narrowly avoiding disaster. Clara's case was part of a broader, international pattern, but one with no identifiable perpetrators, no single modus operandi, and no way to predict where the next victim might appear. Then came the most haunting development. A private investigator in Reykjavik, Bjorn Thorvaldsen discovered a package left at a post office under a false name. Inside were photographs of Clara taken during the day she vanished, moments when she believed she was alone, unobserved, waiting for Evan at the coffee shop. There were no accompanying notes, no messages, only the images. The psychological implication was terrifying. Someone had been watching her, capturing her movements, and knew exactly how to manipulate her and those searching for her. Detectives realized that Clara's disappearance had crossed from physical abduction into a realm of sophisticated, digital orchestration. Every move by authorities was anticipated. Every inquiry into travel logs, hotel stays, and digital footprints was monitored and countered. The perpetrator, or perpetrators, had not only lured Clara but had designed a maze in which every attempt at resolution seemed to circle back to uncertainty. A breakthrough of sorts arrived when Lena discovered metadata embedded in one of Evan's vanished profiles. The data suggested a physical location in Reykjavik around the time Clara was last digitally active. Investigators coordinated with Icelandic authorities, who conducted searches at the supposed coordinates. The results were inconclusive. Abandoned cabins, remote forest trails, and empty guest houses. There was no trace of Clara, no evidence of foul play, only the eerie sense that someone had been there, leaving nothing behind but the echoes of their presence. Meanwhile, back in Portland, the Jensen family struggled with the impossibility of closure. Helen Jensen often reviewed Clara's messages, hoping for a hint, a misstep, anything that could explain what had happened. Every detail seemed to point to the same inescapable conclusion. Clara had encountered someone who may have never existed, someone who could manipulate digital identities and real-world interactions with terrifying precision. Despite the lack of tangible evidence, investigators identified several potential suspects, individuals with knowledge of cybersecurity, travel, and psychological manipulation, but every lead dissolved when authorities attempted to confront them. Alibis were airtight, digital footprints erased, and witnesses offered contradictory accounts. Ramirez began to acknowledge a grim possibility. Evan Callahan might have been a single individual, a network of operatives, or even a phantom identity carefully crafted to exploit the digital age's vulnerabilities. The final twist emerged in an unexpected form. During a routine review of Clara's social media accounts, Ramirez noticed a subtle pattern. Minor, almost imperceptible changes to photographs and messages that suggested post-disappearance monitoring. Someone had access to her profiles, reshaping digital realities in a way that hinted at observation without detection. It was as if Clara's online life had become a controlled environment, a stage on which someone was manipulating the narrative. As months turned into years, the investigation never ceased. Podcasts, online forums, and news outlets chronicled the story, yet no breakthrough emerged. Clara Jensen remained missing. The world saw her as a cautionary tale, a young woman whose search for connection ended in vanishing. Ramirez continued to pursue leads, believing that every thread, no matter how tenuous, could lead to answers. Yet the deeper the investigation went, the more it became apparent. The trail was designed to vanish, the predator to remain unseen, and the mystery to endure. The case closed in the files of the police department only for record-keeping purposes, but in reality, it remained very much alive. The question lingered. Who was Evan Callahan, and what became of Clara Jensen? The possibility that she had been taken overseas, hidden in a remote location, or assimilated into an unknown network remained. The investigation had touched multiple continents, yet the truth remained elusive, obscured by a ghostly persona and a digital shadow that refused to be captured. And so, Clara's story became a chilling testament to the dangers of trust in the digital era. a warning that even the most cautious can be ensnared by sophistication and deception. Her disappearance challenged investigators, baffled families, and haunted the public imagination. In the end, the question remains. Was Evan Callahan ever real, or was he a digital phantom engineered to vanish, leaving only shadows and unanswered questions? Comment your theories below and subscribe for more cold cases as this.